Hello everyone, investment scams rampant. Please vigilant and discerning. Do not trust information from unknown sources. Please make sure to recognize 2 official Capital Securities community, Facebook, Capital Securities, YouTube, Capital Wealth Insights.
Welcome to Q&A Good Night. I'm analyst Jiang Jida. Please like, subscribe, and share. Leave your investment questions in the comments, and I'll answer any I miss tomorrow. We didn't have a live broadcast last week, so I went to the venue in Kaohsiung to give a speech. While I was there, I'm not sure if any of you attended, but I did see a few students come by one after another. Students attended the evening event, coming from Pingdong, Kaohsiung, and Tainan. I look forward to these gatherings, hoping that at these events, everyone can learn the latest, first-hand investment information. This will help you become more confident on your investment journey. As a heads up, there probably won't be any new talks in September, as it would be too hectic for me. The very soonest, I got word today about possibly having a talk, and it might be scheduled for October, probably in early October. There will be one event in Taipei, possibly at the Yonghua branch office in Taipei. Once the date is more certain, I'll give everyone a heads up. Good evening, everyone. Hello? Today is Monday, and I see some students online like Hui Huan, Ji Shi, and let me see, who is this? Cao Ganghuan, Ming, and Alice Fu, good evening. Anaya, good evening to you too, and A Wen Shen, good evening. Xiamail, Oal, and Ming, hello, hello. Okay, so let's move on to today's investment highlights. The most important thing this week, I think, besides the economic data, is the central banks of various countries. The central banks will hold their interest rate meetings this week, and many central banks will be making announcements one after another. Besides this, the market. The main focus will be on the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision at 2 a.m. on September 18th. In addition, the Bank of England and the Bank of Japan will also be making their respective monetary policy announcements this week. So, for the markets as a whole, whether it's Asian stocks, the UK, Europe, or even the US stock market, there will likely be significant volatility. Everyone should pay close attention. Besides the multiple central banks we'll be looking at in a moment, there's also new news this week. A new candidate has emerged. Who is this candidate? This person is a key figure in monetary policy, a candidate for the chair of the Federal Reserve. Today, Treasury Secretary Bessent specifically named a senior executive from an investment institution, expressing that this executive's high-level management experience could bring notable strengths to monetary policy. So, who exactly is this candidate, and what impact might they have on future monetary policy or the Federal Reserve chairmanship? Whether or not this will bring about different impacts. So today, I'll also be sharing some additional insights about this new frontrunner in monetary policy. So, who is it? Nayli C, good night. And I'll answer a friend's question about market movement for Huang Xiaoyu. Right now, gold is still going up. But as for wheat and corn, I might need to find some time to do more research. But gold is really strong, and the current trend hasn't changed. Alice Wu asked when I'll be giving another lecture in Taichung. There should be a chance. I think I've been to Taichung twice this year, once at the Tanzi branch and once at the Taichung branch. It really depends on whether the branch managers in Taichung invite me. If they do, and if my schedule allows, I go to the North, Central, and South regions. It's a bit of a shame that, as far as I remember, we don't have branches in Hualien or Taitung. If there were branches there, I'd actually love to go to Hualien and Taitung even more, because after giving a talk, I like to walk around and explore. For example, last time. On Friday, I went to Kaohsiung to give a talk, and right after the talk, it just so happened that Thursday, sometimes when we go to Kaohsiung for a talk, it's on a Friday. The good thing about giving a talk on Friday is that after the event, I usually stay in Kaohsiung for the weekend. Just last week, a Thursday event meant I could only make a day trip. Afterwards, I went to a famous spot in Kaohsiung, Hamison, near the Pier 2 Art Center. It has a big open field for watching the beautiful sunset. I highly recommend it if you get the chance. By the way, this isn't a sponsored ad or anything, it's just that every time I go to Kaohsiung, I usually visit this one place. If you're from Kaohsiung, like I know SY, Lu, or people like Heyday or Jeffrey, who probably live more in the central or southern parts, like Tainan or Kaohsiung, you might know it. Usually, after my talks, I'll head over to Hamesan Station. There's an MRT station called Hamesan. Once you get out of Hamesan Station, you can just walk to this place called Wan Jia Penghu Baby Squid Noodle Soup. Wan Jia Penghu Baby Squid Noodle Soup is really tasty. Wan Jia Wan is the character for woman next to the character for moon. You can look it up. I think it's a pretty old, established shop, probably several. It's a decades-old shop. Every time I go, I order their seafood fried noodles and pair it with oyster omelette or a plate of baby squid. It's really fresh. If you like stir-fried seafood noodles, check it out. After a talk, I often stroll there. It's nice, beautiful, and I enjoy seafood fried noodles. Okay, back on track. Besides monetary policy, let's look at something else. Tesla surged 6% in pre-market trading today. There's also news about their CEO. Last Friday, Musk made a massive purchase of his own company's stock, almost $1 billion worth, buying over 2.5 million shares. In a bit, I'll talk more about this and share with you my thoughts on Tesla's move to clean up its image. Whether it's Musk buying his own company's stock or the chairperson's comments on Musk's political activities, there are some different points to consider. The real question is, can these actions actually help Musk or even push Tesla's stock price to keep climbing higher? From today back to last week, for 2 or 3 consecutive days, Tesla's stock price surged for 3 days in a row. Whether this momentum can continue, and what the reasons behind it might be, are things everyone should pay close attention to. On the other hand, there's another stock that the market isn't as optimistic about: Apple. Apple is seen as weaker in AI development, showing some weaknesses. However, last week, we learned that Apple announced its latest iPhone 17 phone win. However, every time a new phone is announced, the market tends to react negatively and isn't very optimistic, probably because Apple has been lagging behind in AI development, and the new features seem like they're just squeezing out a little more each time. But I want to tell everyone, every time before or after Apple launches a new product, even though many people are on the fence and there are a lot of skeptical voices, I want to say that every single time, whenever Apple releases a new phone or product, after the launch, whether it's as short as a month or as long as 2 months, the impact gradually builds up, and what usually happens? Sales almost always outperform market expectations. This time with the iPhone 17 is no exception. Of course, today I'll also talk to everyone about whether there's a way for us to take advantage of the launch of this iPhone 17 from Apple. Regarding the phone's development or its stock price, will we see a catch-up rally? Pay close attention. Today, I'll also discuss news on Tesla, Apple, and related stocks. Especially this week, many central banks worldwide are holding interest rate meetings. You really need to be extra cautious about these meetings. Alright, to review, last Friday, the preliminary numbers for the US September 1-year and 5-year inflation expectations were released. The data from last week showed that the 1-year inflation expectation was estimated at about 4.8%, which was slightly higher than expected and about the same as last month's figure. As for the 5-year number, it jumped significantly to 3.9%. Of course, I think a big reason for this is that the market is worried that after the tariff war continues, whether in September or even in the 4th quarter, inflation is clearly starting to stir. In fact, at our seminar in Kaohsiung, we reminded everyone again that inflation at this stage, it could gradually climb into the double digits, but this slow rise is unlikely to get out of control. If you really look at this data, if inflation goes up to 4.5 or 4.6%, we may need to be cautious. Currently, it's maintained around 3%, and while it might go up to 3.1 or 3.5%, as long as it doesn't reach 4%, there's no need to worry too much. This applies to the annual CPI and PCE rates. Regarding the unemployment rate, the current US rate is around 4.2 to 4.3%. We should remember that if the unemployment rate rises to 4.5% or moves towards 5%, that would likely trigger a market recession warning. Currently, however, there is no such warning. While inflation is on the rise, it has not yet gotten out of control. Similarly, the unemployment rate is cooling down slowly but has not collapsed. In other words, the job market and inflation are still within a controllable range. Under this premise, a Fed interest rate cut would be more recognized by the market, and we are not too worried about the market heading towards a recession. So, remember these key numbers. If inflation doesn't break through 4%, we don't need to worry excessively. For the unemployment rate, if it exceeds 4.5% and gets close to 5%, we should be cautious. Before that happens, it's best to treat the situation neutrally. Finally, data is coming out at 8:30 tonight, the U.S. Federal Reserve Manufacturing Index for September. The previous value was 11.9, while the expected value is 5. This data is not considered very important and likely won't matter much to the U.S. stock market. I'll tell you in a bit who will be important this week. There are important data releases this week, as well as key officials and some very important monetary policy announcements. But the 8:30 data I just mentioned is actually not that important. So tonight, there really isn't any significant data that will impact the market. There's nothing. Just take a look and that's enough. As for official statements or investment institutions, let me add a bit here. Morgan Stanley said. He predicts that in the 3 remaining Fed meetings this year, September 18th, then again at the end of October, and once more in mid-December, he believes that at both the end of October and in December, there will be a rate cut of a quarter point each time. A quarter point means 0.25%. So, Morgan Stanley even thinks that in April, May, June, and July of next year, there will also be a quarter point rate cut each time. So, 3 cuts this year and 3 more next year. Overall, I think we can still expect a gradual move toward rate cuts. But whether there will be as many as 3 cuts this year, at the moment, I think the probability of 2 cuts is still higher. The chance of 2 cuts is still higher. It could be once in September and maybe again in December. So, the likelihood of 2 cuts is greater. As for whether each cut will be a quarter or half a point, that's still uncertain right now. But I think 2 cuts this year are something we can look forward to. 2 cuts are possible this year. Also, let's talk about a candidate. Right now, as we know, when it comes to monetary policy, the main leader is the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. Powell's term is set to end in May next year, so after May, he will have to step down. After he steps down, who will be the next chair leading monetary policy? The next chair will be chosen from among candidates selected by Biden or Trump. They will gradually interview the 11 candidates, talking to them one by one and conducting interviews, then making a selection from there. So far, it looks like about 4 or 5 of the 11 candidates have already been interviewed. Recently, there was a senior executive from BlackRock. Let's take a look at him. His name is Rick Reeder, a senior executive at BlackRock and one of their more experienced senior managers. He spent nearly 20 years working at Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was the firm that collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis and never recovered. So, before this, he had about 20 years of work experience at Lehman Brothers. In addition, he recently supported a 2-point interest rate cut. Why did Benson specifically mention him? Because he believes that when evaluating economic data and economic trends, BlackRock's director, Rick Reed, does not just look at lagging economic indicators such as CPI. The PPI and unemployment rates are released a month later, as is inflation. Finally, you see the data, calculate it, and then adjust monetary policy. He believes BlackRock's strength lies in its ability to not rely on lagging data, but rather to have a forward-looking forecasting framework to predict the direction of monetary policy. This is why Shenzhen prefers it. Of course, I think most investment institution executives have some forecasting capabilities, not just academic officials in finance, economics, or monetary policy. We're talking about monetary policy adjustments and views that differ from those of the academic school. Therefore, the past and future backgrounds of those who are deeply influenced by the Fed are relatively similar, so I can understand that they would have some resonance or a sense of consensus. However, I don't think it's likely that Licklider will become the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the future. The probability is higher at this stage, and that is, the current director, the former director, and the current economic advisor, Hassett. I think the probability is still relatively high. I just want to add a little information about Licklider so that everyone can understand it. This is the relevant information that just happened on Friday. Who is this? Matt, much shy, right? Good evening. And Jeffrey, the staff member. Good evening. Regarding whether Powell can be reappointed, it looks highly unlikely at the moment. Trump wouldn't allow it, and his reappointment is basically not going to happen. It's almost certain he will be stepping down. After he steps down in May next year, his position as a board member. According to the legal regulations, he can still serve as a board member. That is, even if you're no longer the chair, you can continue as a board member, since board members have their own terms, and his term hasn't ended yet. Technically, after stepping down as chair, you can still be a board member. But according to the Fed's usual tradition, after the chair steps down, they basically resign from the board as well. They step down completely. So next May, we'll see whether Powell will really follow the Fed's tradition, meaning, as soon as you're no longer the chair, you step down completely and leave, regardless of whether your term as a board member is up or not. It doesn't matter whether his term is up or not. Once it's over, it's over. So if he does stay on, monetary policy might still be influenced to some extent. If he doesn't stay, then that would be in line with the Fed's tradition. I just wanted to point out that, legally and traditionally, things could play out differently. But either way, we'll see what happens next May. It's just the interview stage now. As for Cook, he bought 2 houses, one reported in Atlanta, the other elsewhere. Those houses were the reason Trump took him to court, saying he claimed that both of these houses were for his own use, but in reality, one of them was rented out to someone else. But Cook's side said that if you look at the 2020 mortgage documents, it clearly shows that when he bought the house in Atlanta, it wasn't meant to be declared as owner-occupied, but rather it was indicated as. He didn't declare it as a rental. Instead, he reported it as a vacation home, meaning it wasn't his primary residence but was listed as a vacation property. So this contradicts Trump's accusation that he used a false identity to commit mortgage fraud. Anyway, whether it's Cook or Trump, I don't think this legal battle will end anytime soon. It's not going to be resolved quickly. It'll drag on for a while. Ultimately, the main goal is just to replace Cook, that's all. As for the trade war, let's take a look at this news. China's Vice Premier He Lifeng and Treasury Secretary Bessent are scheduled to meet from September 14th, that was last week, from the 14th to the 17th, just yesterday. They held talks in Spain, of course discussing some tariff-related issues, and Taiwan as well. These tariff and export control issues, including things like talk, are all topics under discussion. Now, during this session when they were debating and making decisions, China actually started to make some moves behind the scenes. For example, they launched anti-dumping investigations on things like simulated American chips. In addition, they've also launched some market anti-monopoly investigations against Nvidia. You know, this is just one of the tactics countries use in a trade war. During negotiations, they might randomly target someone or suddenly decide to investigate a company. Basically, it's all about using threats and incentives to gain more leverage in the US-China negotiations. That's the general vibe. So today, we're seeing anti-dumping and anti-monopoly actions targeting these companies, which is why there's a bit more pressure on the US stock market before trading opens, especially for American analog chip companies like Texas Instruments, Analog Devices, ADI, Broadcom, and on Semiconductor. These companies saw a significant drop in pre-market trading today, mainly because of China's actions. They're conducting anti-dumping investigations, so this negative news might put some short-term pressure on certain semiconductor companies. However, I think if the US-China negotiations from the 14th to the 17th develop in a positive direction, whether it's these anti-dumping or anti-monopoly investigations, in the end, things will probably settle down. An investigation is just an investigation. Whether or not they actually impose penalties is another matter. Whether they actually impose tariffs or anti-dumping duties and so on, those are all long-term matters. These are just bargaining chips in the negotiation process, so it's enough for everyone to be aware of them. There's no need to be overly pessimistic, because there are still a lot of variables at play. As for the positive news related to the UK and the US, I just take a look. The UK and the US are signing some kind of basic agreement focusing on AI and quantum computing. It's said that American companies, including PayPal, Bank of America, Citibank, and S&P Wink with tongue sticking out, are all planning to invest in financial services in the UK. And coincidentally, in the next 3 days, possibly as soon as this Wednesday, Trump might lead several top executives from major American companies to visit the UK. The companies that have been mentioned as likely participants include, of course, Jensen Huang from Nvidia, as well as Sam Altman from OpenAI. Also, the CEO of ColdWeave and the CEO of BlackRock will be going together. We've talked about ColdWeave before. Its parent company is NVIDIA. It's an NVIDIA spin-off investment. I'm not sure about the exact amount, whether it's $800 million or $1 billion, but it's a lot. ColdWeave. Its parent company invested in it. Who is its parent company? It's NVIDIA. So everyone should understand that Jensen Huang, OpenAI, ColdWeave, and BlackRock will all be part of this visit to the UK, traveling together. If the trade talks between the UK and the US go well, it could serve as a great model for other countries, whether in Europe, the US, or Asia. If the talks go well, the US might start investing in your country too, and there will be a lot of high-tech exchanges. It would set a positive example for everyone. As long as you cooperate well with the US, maybe we'll have mutual exchanges. Of course, there are positive examples, but there are also negative ones. For instance, take India. The US imposed tariffs on India, raising them from 25% to as high as 50%. Why? Because India didn't listen to the Americans. They insisted on importing Russian crude oil, so the US was unhappy about it and imposed tariffs. They imposed a 50% tariff, so the world is watching how these countries will respond to the US. The US unemployment rate has stayed around 4%, now close to 4.1%, which increases the likelihood of rate cuts. A quarter-point rate cut is expected in September, with at least one cut anticipated. Will there be another 1 or 2 rate cuts in October and December? We'll continue to observe. The 10-year public interest rate and the final interest rate have both continued to decline by 4%, with the final interest rate remaining around 3.6%. The number of rate cuts has also increased to 2.3%, 8 times, almost 3 times. That's a lot. Good evening, Tony Liu. Let me see if the Fed cuts interest rates in the early morning of September 18th. Will they provide any key points to note when trading US or Taiwan stocks? If so, we might do it on the 17th, as the 18th is Thursday morning. So, if not, it will be on the evening of the 17th during the Group 1 Goodnight Show. We'll remind everyone. There may not be a section on how to trade the stock market or individual stocks in Taiwan stocks, because usually during the Group 1 morning call, our general manager fan will come and explain things to everyone. So, we might do it on the 17th or 18th during the Group 1 morning call. In the morning of the call, there will be relevant interpretations of the Taiwan stock market on how to deal with this Fed interest rate decision. On the evening of the 17th, as early as the earliest, that is, on Wednesday night of the 17th, we will also talk to you on the Goodnight Show about how the Taiwan and US stocks may respond. We will supplement you. Of course, after the supplement, at 2 a.m. on the 18th, it will be time for everyone to face it directly. Whether it is a blessing or a curse, good or bad, no one knows yet, but we will explain the necessary preparations to everyone on that day, so don't worry, there will be some more in-depth research related to it. We will supplement you on Wednesday. The US dollar index rose slightly by 0.03% and remained at the 50-day moving average. It is currently fluctuating. Of course, after the Fed's interest rate decision is announced, the overall trend of the US dollar, including the direct fluctuations or fluctuations of the 10-year or terminal interest rate, and the direction of the impact will become more obvious. At present, it seems that the US dollar remains at the 50-day moving average. What about the purple and green part? The current downward trend in this area also hasn't changed. As for geopolitical risks, this piece of news, I'd say, just take it with a grain of salt and have a laugh. Why do I say that? Trump said that if all NATO countries stop buying Russian crude oil, then they will start imposing major sanctions on Russia. He also said that a US federal official mentioned the EU might decide within 6 to 12 months to gradually phase out imports of Russian natural gas. He also urged the G7, the group of 7 industrialized nations, to do what? To urge that, since China and India keep buying Russian crude oil, these two countries should be hit with a 100% tariff, in order to force Russia to stop attacking UK. Ukraine. Why do I say you should treat it as a joke? First, the EU up to now is now implementing the 19th round of sanctions against Russia. Whether it's the 18th or 19th round of sanctions, and it could go up to the 29th or even the 39th round. The EU is just a loose collection of states, constantly imposing sanctions over and over again. As one organization with 27 member states going up against Russia in this war, they've already sanctioned them 18 or 19 times. The lack of clear results proves the EU is disjointed due to internal disagreement. After 18 rounds of sanctions, Russia should have collapsed, but it hasn't, because of these EU countries. These European countries are still constantly importing Russian natural gas. They still need Russian gas to get by. In the winter, they still need Russian crude oil, cheap crude oil, to ensure that their domestic industries and everything else can keep producing without any issues. So in this situation, when you say they're imposing sanctions, it's just some one-sided sanctions, like occasionally sanctioning a few ships or something. Sometimes they sanction a few ships, sometimes a few companies, or occasionally a particular oil pipeline. That's about it. But overall, I think the impact on Russia isn't that significant. Also, Trump said that all NATO countries should stop buying. As for Russia, that's just not possible. Right now, if I remember correctly, it's Hungary or someone else among the NATO countries who is currently opposed. So, for all NATO countries to stop buying Russian oil, that's about as difficult as asking all EU countries to stop buying Russian natural gas. So, whether it's NATO or the EU, for all of them to completely stop dealing with Russia, only then would the US take action to impose sanctions. So just think about it, do you really think NATO or the EU could completely stop buying things from Russia? That's just not possible, okay? And since it's not possible, what does that mean? It means Trump wouldn't impose major sanctions on Russia. That's all there is to it. So, like I said, you can just look at this and have a laugh, because these kinds of sanctions are all bark and no bite. If you really, seriously went ahead with these sanctions, it would also greatly increase geopolitical risks. If mishandled, a spike in oil and gas prices will cause all prices to rise and people will struggle. Trump is running for re-election next year, so he won't do this. It's mostly just political noise. They hope everyone will cooperate, but honestly, can these new sanctions really be enforced in the end? I think it's very difficult, and even if they maintain it, the impact won't be significant. So in the short term, Ukraine and Russia will at most just keep dragging things out. But if you ask whether this dragging on will cause crude oil prices to skyrocket, it probably won't. Basically, the two countries will just keep negotiating slowly. As for Hamas, Netanyahu, and Israel, well, last week we already knew that Israel bombed the capital of Qatar. Honestly, that's pretty serious. You can't just go around attacking people for no reason. The reason for bombing Qatar's capital was because they claimed that Hamas leaders were there. In the end, Hamas said their leaders weren't killed, they survived. As for the rest. Anyway, the talks between Israel and Hamas are still ongoing, and it won't end that quickly. But eventually, it will come to an end. I think the conflict between Israel and Hamas will end sooner than the one between Russia and Ukraine, because, honestly, in terms of the intensity of the war, Israel has pretty much already beaten Hamas. It's almost over, there's not much left. But Russia and Ukraine are still locked in battle. So, looking ahead. Whether it's Israel and Hamas or Ukraine and Russia, the fighting might continue for a while, but the Israel-Hamas conflict will probably end sooner. As for the impact or boost on crude oil prices, honestly, it's not that significant. The effect isn't that big. Globally, when it comes to crude oil demand, we're still seeing a situation of oversupply. Demand is still relatively weak. So, the direct effect on oil prices isn't much. As for economic data, let's take a look at this preview first. Okay, that's right. Just listen to it and laugh. Lewis is right, that's right. So, in the future, what will you see from Trump, NATO, and the EU? The EU is going to impose sanctions on Russia, and then Trump says that under the banner of justice, or that we will work together with the EU and NATO to impose sanctions on Russia. When you hear this kind of thing, you probably just listen to it and laugh. But when will you stop laughing? That's when he actually does it. If he really does it, we'll see what he did, what he wants to sanction, and then analyze the size of the quota. It's enough if he's just shouting. During the shouting stage, you don't need to consider who shouts the loudest, as if they feel the most famous. But shouting doesn't mean there's a direct line. So, as long as all countries shout, I want to sanction Russia, I want to, just read all the calls for sanctions against Russia. There's no specific list, so just take a look before it's released. As for economic data, there's no important data today, but tomorrow, September 16th, we'll have a quick look at the US August retail sales monthly rate, which is quite important. Also, data like the monthly rate of import prices, industrial output, and some real estate-related data will be released tomorrow night, and I'll track them all. On Wednesday, we'll have the Eurozone's monthly and annual CPI rate, and the US will have the total number of new housing construction permits. Canada's labor decision isn't very important, so just read it. Trump's expected visit to the UK is also expected to begin on Wednesday and last 3 days. Of course, the most important thing this week is Thursday, the Fed's interest rate decision, which is expected to be a 1-point cut to 4%. Powell will also speak at 2:30. In addition, on Thursday evening, the Bank of England will make its interest rate decision. There will also be data on travel in the United States. On Friday, we will take a look at Japan's economic data, including the core CPI annual rate and monthly rate. This may have an impact on Japan's monetary policy. The core CPI annual rate will be announced on Friday. In addition, the Bank of Japan will also announce its interest rate decision at 11 o'clock on the same day. Their governor Ikeda Kazumin will also have a related speech. So this week, I think the more important thing is tomorrow's retail sales. Then on Thursday, we will talk about the interest rate decisions of various countries. How will that affect this? The market has the biggest impact. As for the financial reports, I've taken a quick look at them. This week, I'll show you FedEx on September 19th, Micron on September 24th, Costco on the 26th, and many other companies. The biggest companies are starting to release their financial reports. I think it will start with Micron at the end of September, and then we'll see them gradually around mid-October, when the major banks will start releasing their next round of financial reports. So, I think the earliest possible release of a major financial report or a series of financial reports will be between the end of September and mid-October. Before that, there were no financial reports released, and everything is pretty much finalized. As for the industry, we'll keep watching. He said that the information agency, he said that according to reports, NVIDIA may be gradually scaling back its cloud computing business, specifically the DGX cloud business, which is a cloud-based service. Of course, as everyone knows, NVIDIA specializes in GPUs and related technologies, which are connected to AI. But if NVIDIA gradually shifts toward developing its cloud computing and cloud-based business, whose toes might they step on? They might end up competing with their current clients, their major clients. For example, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon are all their clients. If you start encroaching on your clients' revenue streams or business domains, it will inevitably cause some issues. What was an upstream-downstream or buyer-seller relationship could turn into a situation where you're stepping on someone else's turf. This naturally creates a more competitive dynamic between the parties, making it more tense and confrontational. So, some in the industry say that NVIDIA might gradually scale back its cloud business. In fact, this reduction would benefit NVIDIA and its competitors, because if NVIDIA doesn't get involved in the cloud business, it would be less of a threat to others. For its customers, like big companies such as Amazon or other CSPs, the competitive pressure would also be lighter. Over the long run, these CSP companies would continue to place orders with NVIDIA because NVIDIA isn't stepping on their toes. So, I think it's worth taking a look at this and understanding what it means for NVIDIA or for companies like Amazon. As for CBC and these other companies, things still look relatively positive for now. Looking ahead, aside from this, there's also the matter of the UK visit. Trump took Jensen Huang along for some meetings, and whether they'll land some orders as a result remains to be seen. Of course, this would also help NVIDIA's stock price. But I still want to remind everyone that NVIDIA's fundamentals really aren't a problem. The fundamentals of NVIDIA, honestly, there's not much to worry about. Its short-term issue lies in the technical aspect. In the short term, last Friday it had a slight increase of 0.37%. Although it's still holding above the monthly and quarterly moving averages, it did break below them for a bit last week. After breaking below, it instantly pulled back and consolidated for about 3 to 4 days, then pulled back again, pulled back across the G moving average. Later, we will observe whether this G moving average can continue to hold. If it is just a bounce line and it slowly fails to hold and goes down, then its consolidation period will be prolonged. Because we have told you before about the trend of Hueda, it has no highs and lows, but keeps breaking lows. Okay, it is a high point, but the highs and lows break lows. So in the technical pattern, it will face more pressure from rising and falling. At present, this pressure has not been completely reversed. Unless there's a chance this high point will be higher, but currently it doesn't appear to be the circled high point. If there's a chance the high point will be higher in the next few days, it could be higher than the previous high, or higher than the previous high, the first, second, or third high. As long as it's higher than the previous high, you have a chance to turn things around. But what if it can't? The downward pressure will be greater. If it has a chance to be higher than the previous high, its trend will be more like TSMC's ADI, which was originally high, but kept breaking through the highs and lows. But last week, it surged for 5 consecutive days, so its overall high broke through, and the low did not break the previous low. The low didn't break, and the high broke through, so that TSMC's stock resolved pressure from a strong rally and pullback. Nvidia hasn't yet. So, despite strong orders, promising future business, and good fundamentals, Nvidia's technical side remains cautious. Also, whether Apple can actually catch up with a rebound is still a question. Of course, when it comes to AI, Apple is relatively weak in this area. This is something the whole market knows. Last week, the most important news was about the iPhone 17. Did you all see the related news? I saw the news about the iPhone 17, that phone. I use an Apple phone myself, and I think this time the iPhone 17, it includes, like, the iPhone 17 includes the Air, which is the 5.6 mini, super thin, really thin, the Air model, and then there are the more Pro or Pro Max versions. Whether it's the camera or its core CPU and GPU computing performance or whatever, like using 3nm and 19 chips and so on, there's a lot of features. Even a 48 megapixel front and rear camera, tons and tons of information. There's even this special gemstone glass that's super scratch resistant and pressure resistant. They've used all of that. And for cooling, the Pro models might have some specific cooling plates inside the phone. Overall, I think this time the iPhone 17, in terms of hardware, it really has made significant progress. On the other hand, although in the software part, specifically AI like Siri AI, there hasn't been much of a breakthrough yet, and there's no new information at the moment. But when it comes to hardware performance, I do think there are some impressive highlights. Besides the hardware upgrades, I think the Air version of the phone also has its own standout features. So far, the pre-order situation looks pretty lively. The websites are even crashing, so yeah, it's really popular. Of course, there was news today. A senior AI executive at Apple, Robbie Walker, is leaving the company. He was previously in charge of Siri and other responsibilities. The information and analogy teams are leaving too anyway. They're just leaving. It seems like Apple's AI-related teams are gradually falling apart. Some people are jumping ship, others are starting their own companies. So in the end, how Apple will develop its AI is still up in the air. I think they might end up collaborating with Google, or maybe forming a deeper strategic alliance with OpenAI. That could be the direction things are heading. As for whether Apple can actually develop its own Apple Intelligence, its own AI system, I don't think we'll see that in the short term. We'll have to keep an eye on things later this year and even into next year. They originally estimated that the AI adoption rate would be delayed until next year. But who knows which month that will be? We'll just have to wait and see. But at least when it comes to hardware, the iPhone 17 still has its highlights and is generating a lot of buzz. Of course, there's also a rumor in the market. Another piece of news is about the iPhone Air, the ultra-thin version. The Air model actually looks really nice. Honestly, after seeing it, even I want to buy the Air phone. Right now, it only supports eSIM. An eSIM is an electronic SIM card that's directly built into the iPhone. Unlike the physical SIM cards we're used to, a thin little card. With eSIM, there's no physical card. It's all built in. This feature hasn't been fully rolled out in the Chinese market yet. Right now, only China Unicom has enabled it. China Mobile, which has the largest user base, hasn't opened it up yet. You might ask, will they eventually open it up? Will this affect Apple's launch of the Air phone in China? I think in the short term, it will have at least a little bit of an impact. But honestly, it's not a big deal because the iPhone 17, Polo, and Polo Mace can all still be sold without any issues. It's only the Air version, just the Air, because of this eSync thing. This technology isn't widespread in China, and it hasn't passed due to regulatory reasons. But consider this, China Unicom already has the opportunity to use it. Can China Mobile use it? Of course. And China Telecom? They can already use it too. It's fully accessible. Everyone can use it now. If you don't take advantage of this, China Unicom will take it all. Will other companies open it up? Yes. All of this will eventually be resolved, and the impact on Apple won't be significant. Personally, what I care about is that, although there still aren't any standout AI features in this iPhone 17 product, at least the hardware specs have indeed improved. So I think this aspect will help drive upgrades for this generation of Apple devices, making it worth keeping an eye on. Especially among the big 7 tech companies, Apple is currently in a catch-up rally phase. Whether this catch-up can be as strong as Google's remains to be seen, but at least it's in that phase now. The overall downward trend has already been broken, so just keep an eye on the short term. As long as the 50-day and 200-day moving averages, the green and brown lines, the green baseline and the 260-day moving average, are holding up, there's no need to worry too much in the short term. If those levels hold, then based on how iPhones have performed in the past. As I've mentioned before, whether it was in last week's seminar or whenever we've talked about Apple's stock price, every time a new device is announced, I always remind everyone that the stock price tends to quietly rise in the month leading up to the announcement. For example, it starts creeping up in August, and then by mid-September, since Apple usually unveils new iPhones in the fall, typically around mid-September, when the new phone is announced, the stock price actually drops. Why does it drop? Because once the announcement is made, the market starts to have doubts, questioning whether people start to wonder if the new product is really that impressive, or if, once it's announced, there's a bit of a letdown and it's not as good as everyone imagined. So, in the month before the announcement, the stock price quietly rises because of all the anticipation. But on the day of the announcement, if it falls short of expectations, the stock price drops. However, almost every time, even though there's a dip on the day due to missed expectations after about a week, when the pre-order period starts and the actual product launch happens, which is usually about a week apart, things start to pick up. As the new phone gets into people's hands, your friends buy it, your neighbors buy it, your coworkers buy it, and you get to see and try it out. Then you check out reviews and user experiences online, and gradually the buzz starts to build. So every time Apple releases a new phone, from the moment it hits the market to when the stock price really starts to surge, it usually takes about 2 months. For example, if a surge starts mid-September, that big jump usually happens mid-November. Around mid-November, the stock is about to take off and rally hard. This pattern happens often after about 2 months of buzz. Everyone who's buying the new phone has done so, and whether reviews are positive or negative, 2 months is usually enough time for the market to digest all that news. So, after those 2 months, around mid-November, why does the stock start to rise again? It's because that's when we hit the holiday season. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all year-end peak shopping periods. People buy Christmas gifts, treat themselves to a new phone, or buy gifts for others. That's why every time Apple launches a new phone, about 2 months later, the stock climbs again. That's why the stock starts to heat up and surge. It's for this reason. So you can also watch this time to see if the new phone follows the same pattern. I think it's something to look forward to, because with this iPhone 17, I believe Apple has a real chance for a strong rebound in its stock price. A chance for a spectacular comeback, something worth anticipating. After all, their pricing is pretty much set, but this time I think their hardware planning is really solid. Especially the Air model, I actually think it's quite attractive. Now, as for another stock that has a chance to make some gains is Tesla. It has been rising for 2 days since last week and has a chance to continue rising today. Regarding Tesla's chairman, Elon Musk, I have a question for you. Tony, Lou mentioned something about whether IBM or some other quantum computer is leading the way in quantum computing. I might need to find time to research this area later. I haven't specifically researched quantum computers yet, and I don't know whether it will be IBM or another company, especially since quantum computers are still in their early stages of development. I know Microsoft is also developing its own quantum chips, and Nvidia is competing with them. Jensen Huang was not optimistic about quantum computers before, but then he changed his tune at the GTC conference in March of this year, saying that development might be faster than expected. As for whether quantum computers will be led by IBM or some other company, I think it's still unclear. Honestly, it's still hard to say. It's a bit of a conceptual product. Currently, the industry trends for popular and hot products are visible and profitable. I think it still falls into the AI area. So in the short term, before quantum computers really develop, I think AI still has a long growth period to develop and flourish. So you might as well focus on AI in the short term. You can find some good companies and then make some related profits. As for whether quantum computers will develop like Pfizer, Microsoft, or even IBM, as you mentioned, I think there's still some time to go. When it gradually matures, I think there will be many related concept stocks on the market. It will be in time for me to track them then. Otherwise, it's too late now. Right now, it's still kind of in a speculative phase, like a hype phase. Speaking of which, Apple fans will still buy in, so there's no need to worry about that. I also think people will buy it. Louis Liang asked, Mr. Jiang, will you change your phone? Right now, my phone is actually pretty small. I prefer using small screen phones. This one is about 4.7 inches. It's the iPhone SE, the third generation. The third generation iPhone SE, not the iPhone 3. It's the SE. For now, it's still good enough for me. As for whether I'll switch to the iPhone Air, I really don't know yet. I usually only change my phone when it breaks, but I do think the Air model looks really nice. It's thin and has that techie vibe. The features are pretty solid too. The price is a bit on the high side, but the storage seems decent, like 256 gigabytes. So I think, to put it this way, I'll just wait and see after it comes out and then see if by the end of the year, around Christmas, or maybe about half a year after it launches in Taiwan, there might be some related promotions or deals. If there are any special offers, then I'll consider upgrading to a new phone. Of course, by the end of the year, it'll also depend on the year-end bonus, and if the company's year-end or quarterly bonuses are pretty good, then maybe I'll think about getting a new phone. If not, I'll probably just keep using my SE. Meanwhile, we'll keep hanging out in the group and chatting with everyone about the latest phone trends. By the way, I've already talked about Tesla for 42 minutes now, so about Tesla, their chairman said that Musk has already completed his political-related activities and has returned to the company. So he tried to clear things up for everyone, saying there's no need to worry about Musk's political involvement because he's back now. He also said that these political activities won't affect electric vehicle sales. That's what he claimed. In addition, he mentioned that the German factory might have a chance to increase production in the third and fourth quarters of this year. Why? Because he said sales performance in Germany has been pretty good. This is strange, though, because up until this month, like in July and August, we saw a lot of data showing that sales in Europe, especially from the European factory, weren't doing well. Europe, Germany, France, the UK, basically all the European countries you can think of, their sales have all declined, and by more than 50% in most cases. So why is it that the German factory is now saying that short-term sales are actually increasing? This is pretty different from what's been reported in the market. He's saying sales are up, so he's planning to adjust production for the third and fourth quarters. This is where things get a bit strange, so I think we still need to keep an eye on it moving forward. Of course, with the chairman's endorsement and the German factory increasing production, this has made Tesla's stock price perform quite impressively over the past few days. The biggest positive news today is that Musk bought 2.57 million shares last Friday, with the purchase price ranging from $372 to $396. This is a pretty significant boost. Of course, the price he bought at was also quite high. He spent nearly $1 billion, about $980 million to $1 billion in total. So, even though politically, whether or not this will affect Tesla's future stock price or whether Musk's future involvement in politics will impact electric vehicle sales, I think it will. But as long as he returns to focusing on his main business, if he increases electric vehicle production, develops the robotics sector, robotaxi, or what we call FSD, full self-driving, or even the brain-machine interface revolution, and many other things, even SpaceX, Starlink, as long as he does well in both his main and side businesses and stays out of politics, basically, his stock price will have room to grow. Last Friday, it surged 7%, and today, in the US pre-market, it also jumped about 6%. However, I still want to remind everyone about the downward pressure line. We mentioned this in our show 2 weeks ago, that this downward pressure line has already broken through this triangle consolidation. A couple of weeks ago, it already broke out and retested the neckline position, and so far it's looking pretty good. It tested this resistance line and held above it, so it continued to rise. As for this upward movement, if you didn't buy in or pay attention a couple of weeks ago, and now it's already gone up, after 2 consecutive days, today is the 3rd day. Should you chase it? You need to be a bit cautious and listen carefully. It's not that it won't go up in the future, but after a sharp 3-day rally in the short term, there will inevitably be some short-term profit taking. Even though today's news is very positive, why do I say there will be short-term profit-taking despite the good news? Let me briefly explain from a technical perspective. This neckline is around $290, and the high point is about $367. After the triangle consolidation was broken, you need to know how to calculate the minimum price target. You have to know how to calculate it. Due to program regulations, I can't explicitly teach you how to calculate it, but I can still tell you the high is $367 and the neckline is $290. So, in terms of chart patterns, according to Dow theory, after breaking through the resistance line, you need to know how to calculate the one-to-one price move. You need to know how to do this calculation. Maybe I can only teach you in detail at a seminar in the future. But if you know how to calculate it, you probably understand what I mean. If you know how, you'll realize that when there's positive news today, you need to decide whether to chase the buy or take some profits off the table. You should have a pretty good idea in your mind by now, looking at the current situation. If it were up to me, I'd suggest that if there's a surge today due to positive news and you're holding some Tesla shares, you might want to take some partial profits. But don't go short because Tesla is still one of the Magnificent Seven and is one of the two laggards catching up. It's been consolidating and moving sideways for quite a while, so now that it's finally broken through this downward resistance line, you should know how to calculate the one-to-one price move. As for the news about Micron, just take note of it. There are rumors that Micron might raise its prices by 20 to 30%, and Citibank has also raised its target price to $175. There's another piece of good news today. SK Hynix from Korea made an announcement saying that they are going to mass-produce the world's first HBM fourth-generation memory. HBM stands for High Bandwidth Memory. Right now, we have HBM 1, 2, and 3 currently. The third generation is widespread. Although Micron and SK Hynix are the main players, Samsung is also in the game, but Samsung's yield rates and overall performance are just SOSO. SK Hynix has the largest market share, followed by Micron, and then maybe Samsung. Now that SK Hynix has rolled out the fourth generation, in the future, whether it's energy efficiency or AI operational efficiency, both will keep getting better and better. Of course, as things improve, the demand for HBM will also keep rising. So whether it's SK Hynix, Samsung, or even Micron, it's worth keeping an eye on them, because this will significantly help their revenue and profits going forward. But when it comes to Micron's stock price, it's the same story. Today, there's more good news. Still, you need to know how to do the math. Last Friday, it went up 4.4%, and it's now around $130. The first support was at $103, and it's broken through that. If you want to calculate the minimum price increase, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. You have to know how to calculate it. It's just like this. Subtract this from that, subtract that from this, and you need to figure out how much it is. Once you know how much, then you'll know whether you should chase this good news today or not. So aside from the fundamentals, when we're trading and looking for buy or sell points, you need to be able to calculate these technical things as a basic skill. For example, how do you calculate the minimum price increase for a W bottom? Or for an end top or a head and shoulders bottom? How do you calculate the minimum rise or fall in a crab pattern? It's accurate and useful, but you need to know how to use it. Today, we'll explain where the warning signs are, including lows and highs. You need to analyze relevant algorithms and calculate them. To clarify fundamentals, Citigroup is looking at $175. Before the U.S. stock market opens, Tesla gained 6.6% pre-market to $422. Synopsys is up 2%, Union Pacific 1.83%, and Estée Lauder rebounded 1.67%. Amazon rose 1.27% before the bell. Apple saw a 1% increase to $236. Companies that fell included Envision, Analog Devices, Texas Instruments, Pfizer, and Ascent Semiconductor. China is conducting anti-dumping investigations on these domestic IC chip companies, including Analog Devices and Ascent Semiconductor. Therefore, these companies saw the largest declines before the bell, about 2% to 3%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is still strong, maintaining above its 20 and 50 moving averages, a very important indicator of Trump's performance. The index fell slightly by 0.6 percentage points last Friday, but currently remains above 1%. The Philadelphia Sports Center structure remains unchanged, although TSMC led last week, with Taiwan Construction Engineering Corporation, TCEC, leading. The whole non-semi index rose back above the 50-day and 20-day moving averages. If you stand back above the monthly and quarterly moving averages, don't come back. If you fall back again, it will be more difficult to pull it up during consolidation. The strongest, I think, is still to maintain it in the 7 giants. The 7 giants maintain the 20-day moving average and the monthly and quarterly moving averages. In the future, the 7 giants will still be needed to lead the entire US stock market. It is a tool to gather confidence. So when you don't know which company to choose, just look at the 7 giants. The pre-investment period is enough for you to make a lot of money. The only real buying and selling points are when to buy and when to sell. Position control still deserves everyone's attention. The above is content related to the group internet industry, providing first-hand information before the US stock market opening. I talked for another 50 minutes. Remember to like, subscribe and share when class is over. If you have investment questions we didn't answer, we will reply in class tomorrow. Finally, I wish you all smooth operations. We will talk tomorrow. See you.
Our company has no improper financial interests in the individual securities recommended or analyzed. The information in this program is for reference only. Investors should make independent judgments, evaluate carefully, and bear their own investment risks. If you don't want to miss the latest market updates, be sure to turn on the notification bell and hit subscribe. In addition, we have plenty of great video content on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't miss out. In our group, we share in-depth explanations of global financial events with you every day.